Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and it is time to do my full review of the Sennheiser HD620S. Full-size, closed-back dynamic driver headphone that retails for $350 US. I did a first impressions video of this within just the past few weeks. I will put a link down in the description for you to watch that video as well. This was a loan to me from a friend of the channel who bought this from Audio46. I am an affiliate link member with Audio46, so the link that I will put where you can, in the description, where you can buy this from Audio46 will be an affiliate link, but Audio46 has not asked me to do this, nor has Sennheiser, and they've made no attempt to influence my opinion on this piece one way or the other, so all thoughts you're about to hear are mine and mine alone. If there are any other retailers out there for whom I am an affiliate link member who sell this, I will also put a link for those as well, and I only use affiliate link money to keep the channel going. All right, I ended up really enjoying getting to know this headphone. It sounds excellent. I will talk about whether or not its sound is worthy of the HD600 series label. And then there also are a couple of particularly ergonomic things about it that are less than ideal that we're going to talk about in the course of this review too. So let's do shameless self-promotion and then we will get into it.
Hello. I'm one of the reasons that Wave Theory can't spend all of his money on audio gear. He wants you to know that your support is vital for keeping the channel running. So if you enjoy Wave Theory's bussin' review riz and no-cap review style, and want to encourage him to stay in the basement so I don't have to listen to his dad jokes as much, like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also send him a donation on PayPal or sign up for the Patreon. Links are in the description. Now on to the review.
The HD620S is, in all likelihood, the best Sennheiser headphone since Axel Grell left the company. So, to my ears, it is the best Sennheiser I have heard in their post-Axel Grell era. And so I will put a link down in the description below for all the Sennheisers I have ever reviewed, some of them from the Axel Grell era and some of them after, and that will help you contextualize what I'm saying there. But yeah, it sounds pretty good, and I'll put in there, like, for a closed back at this price, it does some very impressive sonic things. Now, is it worthy of the legendary HD600 series name? That I kind of go back and forth on, and I'll explain why here as the review unfolds. But again, $350 US for this, and it is a closed back dynamic driver headphone. It is rated at 150 ohms of impedance with a 105 decibel per 1 volt RMS input at 1 kilohertz there as the rated sensitivity. So it is not inordinately difficult to drive, but that 150 ohm impedance also does make it tube amp friendly if you have an OTL or output transformerless tube amplifier. This still works well on those. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it proper then on what's going on here. So I just gave you like some of the important specs, other than like I think that it has a 42 millimeter driver in there with like an aluminum something or other. I forget the name of it. Anyway, I'll link to the website where you can read up on it there. And I think like the radiating area of the driver is like 38 millimeters or something like that. Again, it's a dynamic driver in there too. So aesthetically, it very much differs from the HD600 series. Here is my current resident member of the HD600 series. This is the Mass Drop plus Sennheiser HD6XX, which is basically just a little bit aesthetically different, slightly different build, but pretty much the same sound as the HD650. Okay, and you can see the difference here, right? The 620S really has like the chassis and the aesthetic and the overall build and design of Sennheiser's HD500 series. Like just the way that this arm right here that connects the cup to the headband and that sort of thing, like that's very much just like the back of the cup, all that, very much Sennheiser HD500 series. Now, why does it not look more like the HD600 series headphones? My understanding of that is that this basic design, the 600 series chassis here, was never intended to be used as a closed back kind of thing. It was always intended to be open, whereas the 500 series has both open and closed models in it. And so it was much friendlier to do it that way. Then also, like, the pads are different, where we have like a leather or maybe a faux leather, but anyway, just definitely a different pad material here on the 620S as compared to the old, velour ear pads here on the 600 series. That is another notable difference right there. Okay, so like right away, the 620S is different from the 600 series in how it's built. Now, is that a problem? Like, it's still basically an all plastic construction and all of that. Like, is that a problem? No. Like, the 600 series is also mostly an all plastic build with the exception of this part of the headband, but I mean, that's metal on the 520S as well. Or excuse me, the 620S, I just called it the 520, okay? All that, like Sennheisers, even though they are mostly plastic, they are durable, they last a very long time. These designs have stood the test of time in terms of like quality of build and durability and that sort of thing. You'll likely wear out and need replacement pads before you'll ever need to actually replace the headband or, the headphone, all of that ever breaks, okay? They are pretty durable and have a lot of longevity there. Okay. Another departure that this unit has from the 600 series is in the cabling. The 600 series has the proprietary and dual entry on the cup here with proprietary 2-pin connectors. The 620S is much more like its 500 series siblings, where it is single entry on the left side, and it uses a locking 2.5 millimeter plug here on the headphone end. Again, this one is TRRS. I hope that one shows up okay. And you can't really see it here, but there's a locking mechanism that you can see on the barrel here to fit into place. Now, this one is TRRS, so this headphone is wired up to accept a balanced connection, but the stock cable comes with a 1/4 inch 6.35 millimeter plug that has a screw up, it's one of those screw-on adapters for a 3.5 millimeter or 1/8 inch single-ended connector there. The stock cable looks like this. It is about 1.8 meters long according to the website. Here you can see that you can get it to knot up pretty easily there, so be careful how you coil it up. Okay, so yeah, about 1.8 meter length here. All right, it's fairly soft and supple. You see it's got a little bit of memory to it, and again, you can like knot it up and tangle it a little bit. At some point in the near future, I believe Sennheiser is going to release their own Sennheiser brand balanced cable that you can use with the 620S. But for the time being, basically any balanced cable that works with, I believe it is the HD520S in there, will also work with the 620S. The same friend of the channel who lent me the 620S also sent me a Arctic Cables Prisma series cable that has a balanced 4-pin XLR connector on the amp end, and then the same locking connector here, 2.5 millimeter TRRS on the headphone end. I will put a link in the description below where you can order this cable for this headphone here. But that leads me to what I think is an interesting point, and one of the ergonomic quirks that I want to talk about with the 620S that I mentioned there at the top of the video. That is, the 620S seems to be rather sensitive to microphonics, meaning that any kind of bump, or especially if something drags along the length of the cable, like that sound gets transmitted through the cable and into the left ear of the headphone. Okay. And I mean, the closer that the drag gets, that dragging sound gets to the headphone cup, the louder that microphonic sound gets. Now, why is that an issue? Well, when you have this thing plugged in and on your head, okay, just because of the way that it works here, and this is also reminding me we need to talk about the other quirk in a minute, which is the fit, but let's do the cable microphonics thing first, okay? It's just when it's on here, like, the cable here just kind of rests on your shoulder. So like when I turn my head to the left, I can, like, you know, the cable drags here on this part of my shoulder and I can hear that sound transmitted from here up into the cup. Right? Okay, that's the microphonic nature of it. The Arctic cable here does the same thing, but it's arguably even more intense than what happens on the stock cable. So the headphone itself seems rather sensitive to microphonics. The amount of microphonics that happened, like I've just only have 2 data points here, but it seems to suggest that the amount of microphonics will change fairly significantly with whatever cable that you're using. So if you are someone who is sensitive to or bothered by microphonics like that, that's just something to be aware of, particularly if you're going to do an aftermarket cable. All right. Let's talk about the fit in the seal, because this was a complaint I had from my first impressions video, and I was able to mitigate it somewhat here over the course of the review, but not entirely. Depending on your head shape and all of that, you really kind of need to open up this headphone here, the headband, and like use the bigger sizes, because I typically like my headphones to sit a little bit higher on the side of my head when I use them and all that. But if I do that with these, then what happens is like there's a lot of pressure here on the top of my ears here, okay, on the side of my head above my ear, and then like the seal basically breaks down here underneath the bottom of my ear and then around here on the back. That gets mitigated somewhat by just extending these out. Then it's a lot easier to at least get an initial seal, okay, here on my head when that happens, right? So it fits a lot better, it's a lot more comfortable. It still like clamps, you know, fairly hard, but it stays in place well. Not a whole lot of comfort issues here. So again, like this headphone, like I had to play around with the size adjustment and the fit and the finish to get a proper seal around the side of my head. More so than I've had with just about any other headphone I can remember, frankly. So you can get there, but it's a little bit more finicky in the fit and to get the seal and all of that than just about any other headphone I have experience with. So that is something of note. Also, my glasses really mess with the seal here. I don't talk about the change from glasses to no glasses with a whole lot of headphones on my channel because usually, sometimes the difference is detectable, but usually it's not all that big, right? At least not to my ears. But with this headphone, the difference between wearing glasses and not wearing glasses really seems to affect the seal here, and it's very noticeable, okay? The difference is very noticeable. I take my glasses off, they seal up a little bit better. There's a little bit more bass extension, a little bit more sub-bass presence and that sort of thing. And like, it's noticeable, that difference and so forth. Now, so that's one thing. And that's unfortunate because like I need to wear glasses. I'm nearly blind without them and contacts don't work great for me. So just some people are kind of stuck in this world, and I'm one of them. So that's something to be aware of if you are in a similar position as I am. Now then, that just comes back to this headphone being rather sensitive to the seal. Let's come back to that cabling issue that I just talked about, where even with the stock cable, when it was resting here on my shoulder, okay, that was microphonic. The Arctic cable, the aftermarket one here, this plug is just a little bit longer than the stock cable's plug, and this part right here, the strain relief part, is a little bit stiffer than the equivalent part on the stock cable. And then also just the material here, like the rubber coating on the cable, is a little bit stiffer than the stock cable too. So what happens is when this is in here, I don't know if this will be visible or not on the camera, but we'll try it. When this is all plugged in on my head and I turn this way, I can feel like the resistance when it hits here, and that changes how the headphone sits on my head, and that also breaks the seal a little bit or changes the quality of the seal on the left-hand side, which has sonic consequences. So I was able to mitigate the fit issues that I had from the first impressions video somewhat. That happened with a combination of adjusting the size on there, but also just the general pad wear in and all of that. It did get better, but over my time with these, like, just it stood out that the fit and the seal on this headphone is among the most finicky I've ever had with a headphone. And then also, like, it's very easy to bump them out of place, either just with the cabling or just, you know, moving too quickly or something like that, where it breaks the seal again, and then that has some fairly dramatic sonic consequences. And then again, the difference on this headphone between wearing my glasses and not wearing my glasses is one of the biggest differences on any headphone that I've ever heard. Excuse me. So those are all like just ergonomic things, fit and finish, seal quirks to keep in mind. And the microphonics there, and then just the sensitivity of the and finickiness of the fit and the seal, to me, are the biggest drawbacks of this headphone. The comfort otherwise seems fine. The build quality just seems like it's a, you know, classic Sennheiser, where it doesn't just exude tough build, but it just has that build that seems like it's just going to last forever. And again, this design is tried and true over the long haul for that kind of thing anyway. All right. So then with all of that, let's get into the fun stuff, which is the sound. Test gear that I use for this is fairly extensive, so give me just a moment here. Like lossless or high-res FLAC files or local DSD files, streaming FLAC files either from Qobuz or played locally, all via Roon. Roon endpoints would have been my Sonor Ultra Rendu streamers or my Cord 2Go streamer. The 2Go would have been connected directly to my Hugo 2 DAC amp. The other SU6s or other Ultra Rendu would have gone through the Singer SU6 or one of the, or direct USB into a plethora of DACs that I have on hand. This is not going to be an exhaustive list, but in addition to that Hugo 2, other DACs that I have on hand right now to test are my Berkeley Alpha Series 2, the Aqua Lavos S3, the Matrix Element X2 Pure. Okay, those two there are in for review. There are others that made it in there. Oh, the SMSL DO200 Pro as an example in there. Some headphone amps, direct output from the Cord Hugo 2. My Hi-Fi Min Golden Wave Prelude amplifier. The LTA Velo tube amplifier was in there. I also got out the LTA MZ3 and used this to do some comparisons between the Velo and the MZ3. There are other amps again in there as well, but that's just to kind of give you an idea of the stuff that I was using, and all really good stuff. Okay, the sound then. The sound on this, the perceived frequency response and overall tonality, it falls within the range of neutral. So again, neutral is kind of a range, and this, I think, fairly comfortably falls within the range of neutral. There is pretty good bass and treble extension here. So another way that this breaks from the HD600 series is, as good as the HD600 series is, and deservedly so, they are not known for their frequency extension, either digging way deep in the bass or way up in the air frequencies in the treble. This does a better job in both directions in frequency extension than most of the HD600 units do. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a bass cannon. It's not. Like, there's a fair amount of grunt and rumble in the low end, but it is not super standout there. Like, it's not going to satisfy a bass head, but it also is in no way lacking. And again, I think it likely falls within the range that the vast majority of people would call neutral. The treble is pretty well tonally balanced. Good relationships between fundamental frequencies and their harmonics and that sort of thing. There's also a fair amount of smoothness in the treble. The mid-range is where it gets a little bit interesting, because the mid-range is known as the strength of the Sennheiser HD600 series, and it's not poor on this headphone. It's just not quite as strong as it is on particularly the 600 and the 650/6XX. Okay, there's a little bit of a dip in the lower mid-range as compared to the HD600, and there's a little bit of a peak. I think it's around 1 kilohertz, okay, as compared to the HD600. How do I know that? Because Sennheiser published frequency response graphs on their website that I can link you to, and you can see that. So what happens through the mids is that there's just a little bit of tonal imbalance, a little bit off between some fundamentals and their harmonic frequencies. So it's not quite as smooth, not quite as rich, not quite as organic through the mids as the 600, the 650, or the 6XX. It's probably challenging, though, the 660 and the 660S too, without a whole lot of difficulty in that area too. But that little bit of a peak with kind of a corresponding dip in the mid-range, plus the good bass extension and treble extension, does kind of, to my ear, give this just a very subtle hint of a W shape to its frequency response. Still well within the range of what most people would consider neutral, but like neutral W. Okay, just a little bit. And for clarity's sake, that means that there's like just a little bit of emphasized bass, just a slight bump in the mid-range, and then a little bit of extra in the treble, and then like between those areas it's just pulled back a little bit. And again, this is not severe in that it is not distracting. It really is only noticeable mostly when I do quick switches to like the 6XX, for example, but I think it is there just a little bit, but again, still mostly neutral. Okay. Outside of that, though, dynamics, the impact and all of that, good, but not great, but still pretty solid. Okay, the resolution also seems appropriate for the HD600 series. Like the detail retrieval, pretty good for the price, pretty good for a closed back, all of those things, and I don't get the sense that like the other HD600 series models are running away from it. I think it's right there with them a lot on the detail retrieval and the resolution aspects of things. But where this headphone differs from the HD600 line in a good way, in terms of sonics, is in the soundstage. It sounds pretty big in its soundstage. Nice width to it. There's a fair amount of depth to it. And then also the holography within it. Like the 600 and the 650 and all that, they had this reputation for being a bit three blobby in their sounds, in their imaging and their separation, meaning information left, information center, information right, but not a whole lot in left center or left right. The 620S sounds to me a lot more laterally coherent, where there's just not as noticeable a three blob to it. In fact, I really wouldn't call it three blob at all. So to me, the really impressive sonic trait that Sennheiser was able to pull off with this headphone that is a good differentiator from the rest of the HD600 series is that the width, the sound, the size of the soundstage, and then also the accuracy, the holography of the spatial presentation, pretty strong in there. So that was quite good. All right, so overall, sonically, I like it. It is not perfect, but it is solid. And then that staging, the spatial aspects of it for a closed back headphone at this price are also excellent. Like that's a very standout feature for this headphone. And then of course the trade-off is you don't quite get the organic nature of the mid-range that you get with the 600, the 650, the 6XX. So, you know, trade-offs there, but even so, like it's not poor at any of those things either, and like it's pretty solid through and through sonically. I could happily live with one of these if given the opportunity. So there is that. Let's talk some comparisons here. Let me do dive a little bit deeper here on the comparison between the 6XX and the 620S sonically. Spatial presentation, like the 620S sounds bigger and more open, even though it's the closed back and the 6XX is open back. The sound stage on this one is bigger. It sounds more open and airy and that sort of thing on it. The tonality and the timbre, though, are just more natural and organic on the 6XX than they are on the 620. Like, sound signature wise, like the 650 and the 6XX have that a little bit more like upper bass, lower mid-range emphasis that gives it that warmth that you're familiar with that headphone. This one is tuned a little bit more like the 600 and that way, where it's a little bit closer to true neutral and all of that. But again, like just the tonality and the smoothness and the organic nature of the timbre of the 6XX is superior to that of the 620S. That doesn't mean the 620S, again, is poor. It just means that it's not quite as good as the 6XX. However, if you are sensitive to the Sennheiser veil, the 650/6XX has it, and I don't notice it really on the 620S. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So even though, like, what's also interesting is even though the bass extension on the 620S is a little bit better than on the 6XX, the 620S can dig a little bit deeper. There's still a little bit more sub-bass presence, rumble, and slam. So there's just a little bit more bass quantity coming out of the 6XX than there is out of the 620S. Like, not a ton more, but it's noticeable. And I think like bass drums or, you know, kick drums, all that hit a little bit harder. They're a little bit more impactful on the 6XX than they are the 620S. Okay, but both very good. And not only do you have the open versus closed difference among the two of them, they are different enough in their sound that I can see people comfortably having each of these in their collection. Another quick comp here that is a little bit more like for like because it's closed back dynamic driver is the Austrian Audio Hi-X60, which sells for $399, $400 US. So just $50 more than this one. And I got to tell you, I prefer the 620S over the Hi-X60. This one is a little bit more mid-ranged focus. It does not quite have the bass extension or the treble extension that the 620S does. I think it's a little bit more of use for like vocal monitoring, but it's also tuned to like bring out the problems in vocal performances or recordings rather than just being a natural organic kind of presentation, which I think this is more going for, and so forth. Detail retrieval, pretty even between these two, but I think the tonal balance on the 620S is also a little bit better than this one. A little bit better relationship through the whole frequency range between fundamentals and their harmonics. So this one is the more natural and organic sounding of these two. The 620S is over the Hi-X60. So I personally recommend the 620S over the Hi-X60 there as a more like for like comparison. So back to the question of, does the 620S, like, is it worthy of the HD600 like series name? You know, I'm going to cop out on that and not really answer that question. I'm just going to say that in its favor is, like, it has the resolution and detail chops of the 600 series. It has like the build quality and the comfort of the 600 series, even though a lot of that's coming from the 500 series. Okay, all of that. Like, it probably would have made more sense to give this the 500 series name, but it does seem like the resolution and all of that is up there with the 600 series. And then it's not quite tuned quite as naturally or organically through the mid-range as the 600 and the 650/6XX, but also to me, I prefer this over the 660 or the 660S2 by a fair margin. So is it worthy of the 600? I don't know. And honestly, I'm not too worried about that question personally. I'll let you decide based on your own listening and my description here. But the Sennheiser HD620S, a very good sounding closed back headphone at $350 US. Very good sounding closed back headphone there at that price. It does have a couple of ergonomic quirks. It seems very sensitive to cable microphonics, and the fit and seal are on the finicky side, even when you do get them worn in appropriately and all of that. It's just, it's finicky on that, and that's just one of its things, okay? So, but if you can live with those aspects, the sound here is pretty good and the price is pretty solid. Then of course you get that Sennheiser build quality to come with it, even though it looks more like a 500 series headphone than a 600 series headphone. But we'll go ahead and leave it there. Fairly easy to recommend. All right, so I'm Wave Theory. Thanks for watching my review of the Sennheiser HD620S. Please remember to like, subscribe, and comment if you haven't already. Check out my PayPal and my Patreon so you can support the channel in those ways. And as always, enjoy the music.